What's up, guys? Welcome to this podcast. My name is Salman Ali at Salman Ali NBA on Twitter. Here, joined by former San Antonio Spurs PA announcer and current Houston Rockets PA announcer Jonathan Sanford. Jonathan, how are you doing?
It's hot as a firecracker outside, man. When's it gonna cool down? Other than that, I'm doing great.
Yeah, this is. So I don't believe that hell is hotter than this. There's no way. There's no
If
way.
it is, man, I don't want to go there because this is brutal, man. I think this past Sunday I measured like 113 outside as I was out and about Sunday afternoon, and there's two things I'm looking forward to. One is a temperature drop, and the other is Rockets basketball. I can't get here soon enough.
Yeah, you got to tell me. There's got to be some AC up there. I mean, down there. Excuse me. There's got to be some. This is bad. This is like
Yeah,
105 regularly. Like it is the worst summer I've ever experienced. I've lived here my entire life, and I've never seen a summer like this. I
yeah.
hope it's like an irregular thing. Like, I know it's gonna
It
get.
better be.
Yeah, like
It
I
better
know.
be.
I know it's gonna get progressively hotter, but I hope this level of consistent heat isn't like, oh, this is like how it's gonna be from now on. Like if that's, I'm out. Like I'm gonna find somewhere
Yeah.
else to live.
And you think about it, college football season getting started tonight, and
Those
players on the
kids.
field. Yeah,
Yeah.
man, you just have to wonder. I just finished up. My son had a high school football game, and I, I I was up in the press box announcing the game for them, and it's kind of nice in the press box. It's not that bad in the press box, but down there on the field, I can't even imagine what those kids are going through on these high school and these college games right now.
Can you imagine 2-a-days in this heat? Like, oh my God.
No,
Like I
I
just
see. I grew up in Alabama, and back in the my high school days, around that period of time of 2 days, I mean, it was hot. But then by the second week of the football season, it got cool. It was
right.
nice, and now all of a sudden it's like 100 degrees at the beginning of September. I mean, I think tomorrow is September the 1st, and the forecast is 100. So I feel for those kids out there, but you know what? It'll make them tough. It'll make them grown men real quick.
Right, right. So we've been trying to do this podcast for a long time. Like I'm
A long
talking
time, yeah.
like a full year.
I think we first started talking about doing this back maybe in December, maybe, or even
Yeah.
before that. I just remember like the last time we talked about doing this, I had like a sequence of 4 nights of Christmas concerts. For those of you who don't know, I have 5 children.
Yeah.
And when you have 5 children in high school, junior high, and elementary school, the Christmas concert season is crazy, man. You have a concert every night of the week for like, at least a week, sometimes more than that, 2 weeks. And
Right.
you were so patient with me, man. I felt bad that we couldn't get together because there was a lot going on in the season at that point. But there's a lot to talk about, though, going into this season, I'm sure.
Hey, anytime's a great first. Anytime's a great first. So,
Amen to that.
um, I think the first year on your first year on the job is the first time we met because I think I
Yeah.
met you. I think it was catering. I believe it was
Yep.
catering.
Back
Yeah.
in the media lounge, that's right.
Right. So Matt Thomas had just moved over to full-time play-by-play, and I knew that the Rockets had gotten a new play-by-play announcer. Excuse me, not a new play-by-play, a new PA announcer. I
Right.
didn't know what your background was, but I knew you did look familiar. I couldn't quite I couldn't quite put my finger on it.
Yeah.
And we broke bread that day and spoke in catering, and then you told me your background. I'm like, holy, like now I get like
It's all coming back to you, huh?
yeah,
Yeah.
like yeah. So you were present for like some of the more forefront NBA moments of the 2010s.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like not only did you tell me like your amazing story for like how you got to Houston, but like you proceeded to tell me basically everything that happened in San Antonio and like the moments you were present for. Like the Spurs like have been a basketball institution for I would say honestly like up until right around the time you left, which is like 2017,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, like
The last season was 2017, 2018. That was my last season there in San Antonio.
I think that might have been their last competitive season too.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
I mean, that playoff run, the last game, they defeated Golden State, and I think it was game 4 to keep the series alive to go to game 5, and then Golden State won back in California, and then it was all over for my run there in San Antonio. I didn't know it at the time, but I'd been thinking about it and talking about it with my wife about the possibility of moving here to Houston, and but at that moment I didn't know for sure what we were going to do.
Right. So Daniel Lerner of the Houston Chronicle wrote this story about you,
Yeah.
about how you went from San Antonio to Houston last year, And obviously, you told me the story that day in catering, but if you don't mind retelling kind of the story for listeners who didn't read that Chronicle story.
Well, in November of 2016, my wife was diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer, and that season was tough. I mean, my wife was going through 30 rounds of radiation and chemotherapy, and I would should be up all night, dealing with the side effects. Which, if you've known anybody with cancer, sometimes the side effects from the treatments can be just awful, right?
Right.
And so I would be up almost all night with her. I'd sleep a little bit and then head down to San Antonio and call a basketball game and come home and rinse and repeat until May of that following year. And she got a good report and things were moving in the right direction. And so I continued on with the Spurs through that 16-17 season. And if you remember, the 16-17 playoff series with Houston was just incredible. One of my favorite playoff series ever.
Right.
Then, of course, the infamous Kawhi getting injured against Golden State, and it all went downhill from there. But during the 17 and 18 season, my wife's doctor shared with us that he was going to be making the move here to Houston. And, at that point, it was like, okay, our idea was, we can drive back and forth to Houston to MD Anderson for checkups and scans and possible treatments and all of that, or we could find a new doctor. But, one thing about cancer and those who have dealt with cancer or those whose loved ones have dealt with cancer, you develop a certain trust with your specialist, and it means a lot to you. And I really couldn't see in that situation saying, hey, let's start all over again with a new specialist. And my wife and I talked about it. We're also spiritual in the sense that we prayed about it and really, laid it out and all thoughts. And in about May of 2018, I let the Spurs know that, hey, I'm going to be moving to Houston. And the first thought was, hey, are you willing to drive back and forth from Houston to San Antonio? And I just didn't think that would be possible. And I let them know. And this was like in May. And if you remember, at that time period, there was a lot of question what was going to happen with Kawhi Leonard. What was going to be his status? Was he going to remain with the Spurs? Was he not? Well, I kind of knew at that point his time in San Antonio was coming to an end. And the Spurs asked me, would I not make it public yet that we were leaving? Because you had Kawhi possibly leaving, you had Manu possibly retiring. And I think in their mind, they really just wanted to pull the Band-Aid off all at once. And so later on in that summer, in late June, early July, my memory is fading on that now, but they called me up and said, hey, today's the day. And so we let the world know that I was stepping down from the Spurs and making the move here to Houston. And it was an emotional day for me. A lot of great friends there and a lot of great fans. And, I look back on that time very fondly. But as you know, man, my journey to get here to Houston was so incredible. And, we went through COVID in 2020. I'm sitting at home. Rockets fans had an incredible 2019 season and, didn't end the way they wanted it, but, it was certainly very memorable. And 2020 is what it is with COVID. And then 2021 came about, and Matt Thomas hits me up one afternoon and says, hey, this is my plan. I'm going to be going full-time play-by-play, home and away. Because if my memory serves me correct, he was play-by-play on the road and PA at home. And so I'd gotten to know him during their trips to San Antonio, and always enjoyed, fellowship with him in the media lounge, kind of like the way you and I did. And he said, hey, that's my plan. Would you be interested in being the PA announcer for the Houston Rockets? But at that point, I really thought maybe this is more of a backup situation because of COVID. Like maybe, there were so many very well-known PA guys in the Houston area that when the Rockets asked me to come down, I thought, well, this will be great. I can come down here It's really pretty surreal. They brought me down in the Toyota Center. They lowered the big board, the 360 board. You know what I'm talking about inside the
Yeah.
arena? They lowered
Massive.
that thing all the way down the floor. They set up a table, a scoring table, just a section of the scoring table, and they had me announce the game with the game on the screen.
Like a
As
past
if,
game.
yeah, like a past
Yeah.
game. And I just looked at it this way. I thought, man, I have nothing to lose here. I've experienced this in my life. It's a passion of mine. I love it to death. This may be the last time I ever get to experience something like this, so I'm just going to go full tilt and give it everything I got, and then walk out of there and be like, that was fun. And that's really the way I treated that entire process. Like, hey, this is fun. This is icing on the cake for me. And I was actually calling a high school football game a week later when they called me up, and I'm like in the middle of a call, and the phone rings. I looked down. I didn't recognize the number, but I thought it may have been somebody from the stadium. Maybe there was an important announcement or something that needed to be made, and I picked up the phone, answered it, and it was one of the representatives from the Rockets, and said, hey, we just want to let you know you are our choice for the new announcer for the Houston Rockets. And I was like, that's big.
Right.
It caught me off guard. It really did. And I asked him, could I have a day or two to talk it over with the family and others, and I did. And then that next week, they made it official. And, man, it was like snap of the finger, go from just wishing I was back in that seat to then all of a sudden it's an opportunity again. And so it was really, really special.
That's a hell of an audition. Just bringing that massive 360 camera
I
down.
could not believe it, brother, when they lowered
Yeah.
that thing. It was there on the floor when I walked in, and I'm like,
Yeah.
sometimes they lower those things to the board when they're doing work on them, right? I've seen
Right.
that. But, man, they had it on the floor, and they had that thing
And
fired
working.
up. And,
Yeah.
working. And I
Yeah.
did the intros of the team just like I would do on a regular game night, from the visitor intros to the Rockets intros. And it was so surreal, right? I mean, just the entire process was so surreal for me. And, my first thought, really and truly, was, okay, I was a Spurs announcer for all those years. Are the Rockets fans going to be like, what the heck? Who is this guy? Why is he now with the Rockets? He's the Spurs guy. And the other thought was, man, those Spurs people are going to think I'm the world's worst trader in the history of the business, because I grew up in the state of Alabama. If you were the announcer for the Alabama Crimson Tide and you went over to be the announcer for the Auburn Tigers, I think the Alabama fans would probably string you up somewhere, right? It's just there's that big rivalry. But what I discovered, and it's really cool, was that due to the circumstances and the respect between the organizations and the fans, it was really special. Now, if I had come from the Dallas Mavericks,
I was just about to say this. Yeah.
I don't think it would have worked, but there was enough respect there between the two organizations that the fans were like, hey. And I remember, some of the tweets and things that came out, and they were mostly, overall positive, but there were a couple Spurs fans that were kind of like, hey, what's going on here? But after a while, it was very, very pleasing to see the overall reaction.
And after they see your story, how could they not just feel happy for you? I mean, it was like, so I remember that rivalry between the Rockets and the Spurs, and it was how you described. Like, I don't think the fan bases hated each other. I think, I mean, the part of it is like the Spurs were just way better, right? For the majority of Tim Duncan's reign, right? Like, it wasn't a competition as like who was the better organization, who was like a legitimate title contender. Like Harden's peak years, maybe like that 2016 series, maybe you could say it got close, right? But for the most of the time, go ahead. Yeah.
For me, there are moments that I'll never forget from that side of the equation. I remember after the Game 5 in San Antonio, where Ginobili was able to block Harden from behind.
Yeah.
We had lost Kawhi Leonard and Tony Parker in that series. If you remember, 2 games earlier, Tony Parker tears his Achilles.
Yeah.
And then Kawhi goes down with an ankle injury at the end of the regulation in Game 5. So a bunch of us got together and said we're going to go to Houston to watch Game 6 with every indication in our mind that we were going to be coming right back for Game 7 because no Kawhi, no Tony Parker. we thought we're going to go in here to Houston, and it's going to be hard to get out of Houston with a win. And I'm sitting down in the west end zone, the west baseline, with a group of Spurs fans, and watching this go play out. And I just stood there in kind of stunned silence with a lot of Rockets fans who couldn't believe that the Spurs had come in there and won that game that night. And I couldn't believe it either. I really thought, for all intensive purposes, I was going to be driving back to San Antonio and getting ready for Game 7. But there were a lot of moments that just were so up and down in that series that I think it gave both teams something to cheer about at times, and then some moments to kind of shed a tear or two, the way some of those games ended for both teams. So it was a great series, one of my favorite memories, and to think that now I'm on this side. And one thing people don't know is, and I've said this before, but not a lot of people know this. I grew up as a Rockets fan. I was a big Robert Horry fan. And when he played for the Rockets, man, he won my heart and made me care for the Rockets. And Houston was the first place we lived when he moved to Texas back in 2003. So I never saw myself being with the San Antonio Spurs. They were kind of the antithesis of what I liked as an NBA team. The style of play, everything about them. But then when you went to work for them, you learned to really respect them for what they were doing. And you talk about the big three there, Tony, Tim, and Manu. How could you not help but like them once you were a part of it? Because they were so kind and so loyal. So I really enjoyed that time.
Yeah, and like as from my perspective as like a Rockets fan, again, like I just never thought it was that close. Like I just thought the Spurs were better, and like when someone's that much better for that long of a period, it's hard to feel vitriol. It's just like they're
sorry, but I imagine some Rockets fans might argue that fact with you.
They're probably pissed listening to me. I don't like.
I'm not saying that. You're saying that. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, no,
I don't
okay.
know. I really, for me, it always seemed like a huge challenge. Anytime the Rockets came into the AT&T Center, I knew I better have my A game on. I knew it, especially when Harden was there in Houston. I had better have my A game on and be ready to go to work because it was going to be needed. Because they were going to come in there and give us everything they had, and of course, same, vice versa. So they may argue with you a little bit, but that's okay.
I mean, here's the thing: the Harden years were what, like 8 years, right? Like we're talking years where like the Rockets were throwing out Luis Scola, Kevin Martin, and Kyle Lowry. Like that's such a small period of time relative to the Spurs dynasty, right? Like for the most part, they've just been dominant. Like yeah, sure, you had T-Mac and Yao for a period, right? And then you had the 13 points in 35 seconds game, right? Which is like an iconic Spurs Rockets game.
That's the heartbreaker for a lot of Spurs fans.
Right. Yeah. And you have games like that, but those are blips, right? For the most part, this is my perspective. But so going back to like this Chronicle story, like what I found interesting from here was like a quote from you actually. I'm just gonna read it here. I thought my NBA announcing career was done. Like I thought you walk away from an opportunity like that, chances of being in a role felt slim. You give it a shot. You give up a spot. There are only 30 spots in the NBA. It didn't seem feasible. Dude, that is such a vulnerable thing for you to say because in sports is brutal, man. Like, it just is.
Yeah.
Like, I get an email, like, once every 3 weeks from a kid who wants to break in. And, like, I'm never discouraging, right? Like, it's awesome they want to do this, right? But you always have to add that line in there, like, be prepared to eat for a while, right? Like, there are certainly like people who are talented enough or fortunate enough to get like shot out of a cannon, but most stories are people kind of grinding away and then feeling constant job insecurity. Like, it was years before I got my first paycheck, and then it didn't dawn on me until reading that column that someone like you, like for all intents and purposes, like had reached the top of your profession, like one of the 30 PA jobs. And it just so happens that, it happens to be at one of the 30, like one of the legendary franchises in the NBA, that someone like you could feel that level of job insecurity. And I guess my question to you is like, how real was that? Like, were you really feeling like, oh, I'm walking away and I may not have the opportunity to ever do this again? Like, was that actually like a feeling you had?
I'll just be completely honest with you. There were tears shed. When you're as passionate about this as I've been since I was a little kid, and you get that opportunity and you experience what I was blessed to experience, and then you walk away from it, and then it starts without you. The world goes on without you. The next season after I left San Antonio, hey, they fired up that season. They went right along. It didn't stop just because I walked away. And I think that's when it hit me, that fall, when opening night happened for the NBA. And I was actually sitting in my office that evening, and I closed the door of my office, and tears would just, come down my face, because that's when it really hit me that I'm not going to do this again. That was really how I felt. I'm never going to get that opportunity again. And it really was tough. My wife, God bless her, I love her to death. She is the most optimistic person I know. Defeating cancer the way she did and going through what she did, she would say, Jonathan, it's going to happen. You're going to get another chance. But I'm like, no, babe, you don't understand. There's only 30 of these jobs, and the chance of me getting another opportunity is slim to none. And then, to make it even worse, for years, I'd been talking with the people with 2K Sports about adding the PA feature to NBA 2K. And then I leave the NBA, and the next thing you know, hey, guess what? PA announcer is now going to be featured in the game. And I'm like, man, I remember a good friend of mine, he calls me up, and he's a fellow NBA PA announcer, and he was telling me, and he was all excited. And I did everything I could to be excited for him and to show joy for him. But like the moment the phone hung up, I was like, golly, like
That close.
punch
Yeah.
right in the gut, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, I mean, you mentioned the word vulnerable, and that's really how I felt. I felt like at that moment it was finished, and that was a part of my life I would never get to experience again. But like I said, when I went out on that court that night, and that board was lowered to the floor, and I had a mic in front of me, and I was calling an NBA game virtually in that sense, that's why I just let everything hang out, because, hey, I was dead and gone. I was dead and gone. I was 6 feet under, and then here I was getting this opportunity. So whatever happened was going to happen. And the moment that I found out that they had offered me a position, the same type of tears that I shed in the fall of 2018, but these were joyful tears flowing down my eyes, but this time out of joy for the fact that something very, very unexpected had now become a reality, and I was alive again. I was resurrected in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, again, like it didn't dawn on me until I read that story. Like, oh, these 30 guys for the most part don't move a lot, right? These
No.
jobs are very sticky. Like, some of these people have these jobs for like decades, and when one opens up like that, the chances of you grabbing one of them are so slim
So
to
slim.
none, right? Especially if you're out of market like you were, right? Like it
Yeah.
usually goes to someone in that local market.
And that's the way I approached it. I think I said that earlier, but that's the way
Right.
I approached it. There were several guys in this area, well known, good announcers, and I thought certainly that position is going to go to one of them. And if I'm a backup and I get to do a game one day, yeah, that'll be great. But I did not see that. And maybe I underestimated my value. I don't like to overestimate my value, but maybe I underestimated my value. I don't know. But the
I
fact
think you did. I think you
that
did.
they
If
saw
I may say
something
that. Yeah.
that they saw something in me in that audition process to say, hey, it's okay to go out of market here and give this guy a chance. And that, listen, I think the Rockets every single day, every single game that we have, from the tip-off until a Rockets win, if we get a win, even a loss, thank you for the opportunity, because I could be sitting at home. I could be sitting back at home and not have that opportunity. So, like you say, 30, and I'm grateful to be a part of that brotherhood and be one of those 30.
Yeah. Sports is awesome. It really
It
is.
is.
It's just awesome. So let's get to something fun. So you were obviously there for several years, including the championship season in 2014. Can you tell me like the best moment you remember offhand, like in the building to witness? Like for me, like I'm like, it's got to be the Game Five clincher in San Antonio, right? Like, or does something else obvious come to mind?
Okay, I'm just gonna be completely honest with you. Game one had a crazy deal for me. Okay, first of all, that afternoon, if you've never been involved in NBA finals, ESPN is very particular in how they put things together from a um, producing standpoint for how they want things to look and how they want the intros to feel and everything for an NBA final. So I come in that afternoon. It's such a big production. I had no idea what kind of production it was going to be like. I come in there that afternoon, ESPN, we go through the player intros, they script everything. Well, about 30 minutes before we went live that night, I turned to our director of game operations and I said, "Man, it's getting hot in here." I said, "It is really hot in this arena." And
Right.
Daniel looks at me and goes, "You're right." And he's director of game operations. He radios to facilities and is like, do we have a problem here? Like, what's going on with the temperature? And they found out at a little bit later on, within the next 10 minutes, that we had a major problem. And the main AC unit, something electrical had gone bad way up in the rafters, and we were going to be playing that game that night without AC in the bowl. And then say we're getting ready to go live, and we've got all this issue with the AC. I'm sweating, and they have put this makeup on me. I'm not a normal makeup wearer, so I'm not really accustomed. They put this makeup on me, and for the TV shot, and now I'm sweating. So this makeup is like going down into my face and my eyes, and I'm trying to keep it out of my. I wear contacts, and so it's like blurring my contacts. And we're getting ready to go live in about 5 minutes before we go live. So one of the guys from ESPN comes up and he changes the script. It was going to be welcome to the 2014 NBA Finals. That was the way we first had it written. Well, he comes up 5 minutes before we go live and alters the script to say 2014 instead of 2014. So here it is. I'm the first voice you're going to hear coming in this broadcast on the intros, and I start, welcome to and I started to say 2014, and I caught myself right in the statement, and I said 20, and it came out to where people at home thought I said 20,014. So then, with millions of people watching all over the world, people are going, did he just say 20,014? Is that Roger Goodell? Because if you remember, he had an issue like that one year in the draft. And so I'm like, man, so frustrating. My first NBA final, first time going live, and then that happens, and so I'm frustrated with that. But then, I mean, it was such a crazy night. The temperature down on the floor was 92 degrees, and you had LeBron. I don't know if you remember this or not, but you had
The
him
cramp.
cramping up
Yeah.
over on the baseline, and they had to carry him in front of me. And he's, they're carrying him right in front of the table, and I'm watching him just cramp up and in pain, and we win that game, and that whole thing was such a crazy night, right? And on one hand, I felt bad about the issue that I had in the intros, but then on the other hand, the way the game turned out, and here we've won game one, and it was a pretty wild game towards the end, and so it was just overall a big memory. And then, like you said, game five, you come out in game five. By the way, I nailed the intros from then on out, but game five, they jump out to a 16-point lead. And we're all kind of looking at each other at the table going, come on, what's happening here? And it toward the end part of the first quarter and then going into the second quarter, all of a sudden the Spurs just flipped that switch and went on a huge run and had the lead and just really never looked back. And in some ways, I wish I could go back to that night once again and slow down time so that you could savor it just a little bit. They say for players, and especially for coaches, you go through that moment for the championship, and as soon as the bubbly quits flowing, the reality hits for the coach especially that we got to look towards next year. And I wish I could slow down time and have experienced that and had a wider vision of things. to have even more memories than I have today. Because you talk about opportunities, you think about it. Not many announcers will ever get one opportunity to do that, and I've had that opportunity and came out with a championship and a championship ring and a lot of memories. But your mind always wishes you could slow down time and kind of soak even more in than you did.
God, it's such a cool moment. It really is because not many people get to cover that. Like it's like the furthest I ever got to cover was the Western Conference Finals. And you're right, like you see every round that stage get bigger and bigger and
Bigger.
the
I had
more
no idea.
yeah.
I had no idea when I drove up to the AT&T Center for Game One. All the staging, all the trailers that they bring in for all the production. I had no idea what I was walking into, and sometimes I like to say ignorance is bliss, and I think it really is in that case because you're just experiencing it all for the first time, and that's what I look forward to with the Rockets. Like 93, was it 93, 94?
Mm-hmm.
That time period, 95 in that area, where Rockets fans, that was fresh for them,
Mm-hmm.
but it's been a long time, and so for many Rockets fans, the experience of an NBA Finals will feel brand new, and that ignorance will be an eye-opening experience. Just how grand of a stage it is one day when the Rockets are back there.
At this rate, the playoffs is gonna feel like that a little bit too. Right?
I'll take it. I'll take playoffs. I'll take the play-in. You give me a play-in. Give these guys a taste of a playoff game, and give these fans another taste of the playoffs. I'll take it right now. If you could guarantee it, I'd take it in a heartbeat.
So I remember. So people always talk about how the attendance in Rockets games, like in the playoffs, right? People always used to talk about that on Twitter, and I noticed it. Yeah, for sure. Like it was sparsely attended toward the end of the Harden years. If you go back to those first Harden years, like when they had that a little bit of a drought between Yao and T Mac, and then Harden comes to Houston, those first few games were popping. Like they were jam packed. Crowd was electric because that feeling of getting back to the playoffs it's unlike anything like I've ever experienced. It's nuts.
Ask the Sacramento Kings fans what it's like to go with a long drought. If you saw the atmosphere
Right.
inside their arena during the playoffs this past season, it's probably some of the most special atmosphere for an NBA game we've seen in a long time. They really had a lot of fun, and you got to tip your hat to their game operations and everybody who made those games special. From the beam, you've seen the beam, right? I mean,
Right.
everybody that heard about that or saw that was like, wow, that's pretty special. So you're exactly right, and I think sometimes when you are so used to your team being a part of playoffs and challenging for Western Division championships or Western Conference Finals, or there can be a little bit of apathy that can come in there. There can be a little bit of expectation. Now we're just going to get there. But the work that it takes to get back to the playoffs, and that's one thing coming into this season. I'm going to say this right here and right now to all Rockets fans. Everybody needs to show up as much as possible and as loud as possible, and take it from the Sacramento Kings fans and what they did last season. If you don't believe that an arena and fans can make a difference for momentum with a team, then you're not paying attention to what's going on in the NBA, because it can make a big difference. It did for Sacramento last year. Of course, they get a lot of talent. Don't get me wrong. But that arena made a big difference in some of those games.
And I can't wait. I can't wait for this organization
I'm
to
excited.
get back. Yeah.
We had one of our first meetings this week with some of the other Rockets entertainers. I got on my Rockets entertainer shirt tonight. And, from Kiati, our in-arena host, to DJ Palmo, who's our in-arena DJ, Natalie Alvarado, who kind of puts all these pieces together. All of us are just super excited for the challenge that lies ahead, and the opportunity to be fresh and to be creative and to come in there and try to add to the atmosphere that we already have an expectation is going to be great. So I'm looking forward to it.
Right. Yeah. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. So The rundown is very scattershot today because it's our first time recording together, and it's also my first
Yeah.
time recording a podcast in a couple months. So I'm a little bit rusty, and obviously I wanted to do a proper intro with you, and I wanted to spend the first third obviously talking about your background, but
Right.
before we spend the second third actually talking about Ime Udoka. And the reason I want to talk about Ime Udoka is I think the most consequential thing that happened this summer was his hiring. And I think it really set the tone for the rest of their offseason. And broadly, it reset their culture in a way, organizationally and as a team, that I think was interesting. And if I'm not mistaken, I think your first year as the Spurs PA announcer was also Ime's first year as an assistant coach. Am I correct
That
in
is
saying that?
correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So first, I want to ask: did you ever get to develop any sort of relationship with Udoka, like during your time in San Antonio?
I did, and I always was super impressed with Ime Udoka and his time in San Antonio. I was not surprised when his departure from San Antonio and an assistant role outside of the Spurs led him to have a head coaching spot in the NBA in Boston. I was not surprised by that. I was not surprised by the success that he had because he always was super bright as an assistant coach, always seemed to have the right ability to reach players, especially certain players there in San Antonio, that I watched him have a very positive effect in their relationships and the way he was able to mold some of those guys in San Antonio, especially some of the younger guys that came in to that organization during my time there. So if you're able to do that there and you're able to reproduce it elsewhere like he's done, and now you know he's coming to Houston and is going to be with us, it breeds a lot of hope for me because I've seen firsthand the type of relationships that he can have with players that lends itself to their growth and their success. And whether it's a role player or a starter, all those guys together under his tutelage and kind of his ability to motivate, it gets me excited. It gets me hopeful for what we can see this season as we begin that process of that culture that you speak about.
Right. And to be honest, like I don't really know anything about Udoka other than what I've heard from other people and like, other reporters what they've written about him. I've never had a conversation with the man or seen any of his locker room or practice environment, settings. So I am curious, like, because like, again, obviously you said you developed that relationship with him. Like, what is he like as a person? Like, what did you hear about him as a coach and see him in those environments? Obviously, like, around Pop, around those other assistants who went on to have head coaching jobs elsewhere. I'm basically asking you, John, like, what is he about? Like, what's Ime about?
The one thing that always stood out to me about him is his ability to find in a player the different players. What is exactly that thing about that player that he can reach that will motivate them to go beyond what is their normal expectation and their normal standard? He always seems to be able to find that in an individual player. And it's different for every player. You realize that it's different for every player. And the real genius of a coach is being able to tap into that to every player, not just a few, but to every player on your roster to find how to get the best out of each player. Now, granted, in San Antonio, there were guys like Tim, Tony, Manu that, he didn't have to do a lot of mentoring with, but there were younger guys on that roster that I think about back during my time there that I watched him get the most out of, that even some of those guys that nobody really thought were going to get a lot out of, he was able to get more out of them than the expectation was. So, I think a lot of people looked at him in San Antonio, oh, he's kind of quiet, but he wasn't. He had a way, without making a big to-do about himself, which you have to be that way in San Antonio under Pop. It's not about an individual having the spotlight on him. It's kind of the spotlight is on the whole. So without having to make the spotlight about him, he was able to get in there and get these relationships with these guys and build them and find those areas within each guy that he worked with that needed some motivation or needed some positive encouragement or some exhortation, whatever it took to get them fired up and ready to go.
Yeah, I know I just said that I never talked to the man. I do remember being in a press conference setting with Ime, and what struck me is like what you just said. What struck a chord with me is like it wasn't about him.
Mm-mm.
Everything was about the players. Like that press conference setting. The reason it was so forgettable is because it wasn't. It was literally about the game. Everything we talked about was game related, player related. Very specifically, what are these guys going to do to help us win tonight, right? And like that to me is like obviously a skill that's underrated. Like being able to connect with players on an individual level like that is extremely hard, especially with like what is it, 17 player locker rooms we have nowadays
Yeah.
in the NBA. That's hard to just being able, because some guys are gonna be pissed at you. Like some guys are not
Yeah.
gonna play. Some guys are gonna be, out of the rotation, and you got to be able to keep them engaged throughout the course of the season. Like, hey, when it's your chance, you got to be ready. And I think that's a skill. I mean, Pop more than anybody demonstrated that skill. He was one of the only coaches that could run out 12-man rotations consistently throughout the course of a season. That's so hard to do.
Yeah.
I never see that successfully done. He did that all the time.
And, I think that the big thing is when you have worked under Pop the way that he did, you get a lot of mentoring yourself.
Right.
I mean, I was the PA announcer, and I got attention from Pop. Like, I mean, he knows how to get the best out of everybody, and to find out what needs to be done to get the best out of somebody. And whether you're one on that roster or 12, he's going to find out how to use you to benefit the whole. And so I think Ime certainly had to learn from that, and I've witnessed that in what he did in Boston. Early on in that season, people were like, hey, wait a second, but as you saw him get that culture kind of started and that ball kind of rolling, once he got that ball rolling, I mean, it was quite impressive to see.
Yeah, you can always tell how a person is, like in terms of qualifications for his job, just based off what other people are consistently saying about him.
Yeah.
And with Ime, it's always
There was no surprise. There was no surprise to anybody in the NBA who knew Ime, who knew of his professionalism as a coach at that period of time before he got the job. There was no surprise that he ended up in that position.
No, I mean there was talk about him getting the Rockets head coaching job.
I did not realize that. That's a new one for me.
Yeah, he was one of the rumored candidates to come in for an interview, and like that's not like Ime was doing that constantly. He was constantly interviewing for other jobs, like because people always heard about him. Like his word about him spread like wildfire in the NBA, and when he his exodus from Boston was obviously ugly, but people still wanted to hire him because he is that impressive. He is that connective to players. Like players in Boston still talk about him, like, and he's
favorably, very favorably.
Yeah, he's been gone for like 15 months, and he's still talked about there as having a significant effect on those guys. And I think that's going to be important because he came in there at a time where those players were coming into their own, and that's kind of the Rocket situation here. Players here a little bit younger than when Ime went in to Boston, right? You're talking about 25, 24-year-olds. Over here, you're talking 20, 21-year-olds. But like he's going to be here when these guys are ready to go into their own, and he's going to have to guide them through that process, and he has experience there.
And you bring to my mind how there are certain players on this Rockets roster that we're going to get to see just what he can do with them. And I'm not going to name any names right now, but knowing some of the players the way I've learned them over the past 2 seasons, having his influence over some of those players and what he is going to be capable of encouraging them and motivating them to do is only going to take their game to a higher level. And some of those guys have immense talent and has just kind of waited for this opportunity to spark that growth that I think he is capable of getting them to do. So not only is he going to help the whole team, but some of these guys are really going to benefit, I think, right away because of his influence.
I mean, I think Jabari was talked into doing summer league because of Ime. Like he was not. I don't think he was slated to do. It surprised me that he was doing summer league. Surprised a lot of people, and he did it.
And he was motivated for the whole run. By the way, he wanted to go the distance.
Yeah, and he was damn good. And I think that's like, I'm not going to credit that to Ime because obviously that's on Jabari. Jabari gets the credit for that, but like Ime talked him into doing that. And I think that helped his confidence, right? Playing as well as he did in that environment. After a little bit of a worrying season that first year, like that having that summer league run inspired a lot of confidence in himself, not only with his own confidence, but a lot of people around the NBA are like, oh, this is why we fell in love with Jabari.
That's exactly right.
This is
Well,
why he was once the number one overall pick, right?
As somebody who watched him very closely in college, the Jabari Smith that we saw in summer league is the Jabari Smith that I saw at Auburn. The confidence was there. Some of the shots that he took during the summer league looked so the manner, everything reminded me so much of his time in Auburn. And that you said it encourages him. It encourages us as well as fans and announcer. It gives you a real bit of excitement to see him continue that into the fall.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see Jabari Smith in his second year. I mean, people forget how young he is, right? Like he was the youngest of the 3 top guys in the draft last year. He turned 19 right before the draft, and that just made him qualify. Right, you have to turn 19 in that calendar year. He turned right before the draft, and all those other guys are 20, 21, and he's going to be a 20-year-old this season. While some of these guys are entering the end, like Amen Thompson's 20 years old right now, right? Like that, like to give you that perspective, that's how young the dude is. And I mean, you talked about how he played at summer. Like I actually thought he got better as a ball handler from his time at Auburn. Like he looked like he really worked on that this summer.
That's something you can really see. That was one of the things that people criticized him on coming out of Auburn, and there was some legitimate concerns there from a draft perspective that people put out. But, you mentioned in Summer League, man, you can tell the effort, the work, the study. He's been putting it all together.
Yeah, and that's what I like about Houston's young core. Like, you always hear great human intel, right? Like Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, and Amen Thompson in particular. Those 3 had great human intel coming out of the draft, like hard workers, great individuals, always in the gym, and you see that in how quickly they add skills to their game, or how quickly they get better in certain areas. Like Jalen Green as a passer, like that's
a great point.
Was rapid,
Yeah.
and I think that's something that he heard the criticism, took it in, and properly addressed it. Or worked on it. It's still working on it too. I'm not going to say he's a finished product, but like you see the growth, and I that's what I like about Houston's young core.
Everyone that you just mentioned, that mentality of grinding and working until you get it right. There's an old statement that I like. You don't do something until you can get it right. You do it enough until you can't get it wrong. And that's kind of the mentality that I see in these guys. They don't do it, whatever they're working on, until they get it right. They keep doing it until there's no way they can get it wrong. And that's what I appreciate about their kind of mentality that I've seen. And you look at Fred VanVleet, who's coming in, and the work that he and Jalen have done together this summer. It's encouraging to see that work ethic. And looks like Fred VanVleet is going to come in here with that mentality to be that leader that I'm sure Ime is looking for, and that's a positive thing as well.
Right, yeah. Like, full disclosure, the NBA season kicks off in about a month. I am beyond excited for Rockets basketball return. Like, I was bored out of my mind the past month and a half. I've been going on these vacations, and I'm just like not enjoying them. I just want basketball to return. I'm gonna be watching a healthy amount of preseason basketball. I'm gonna be reading a lot of season previews, listening to a lot of podcasts, producing a ton of content myself.
Yeah, I was gonna say you need to produce a lot of content. You got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Right, yeah. And I wanted to ask you a super broad question because I feel like it pertains to you almost as much as anybody, because you're going to be calling these names out, right? Who do you think, and this is kind of, again, super broad, will be the most exciting Rockets player next year? Like, who do you think is going to be the main attraction? Like, who is the guy that's going to get this team going? I mean, maybe leads the team in scoring. Like, who is that guy for you next season, going into next year?
So you could easily say Jalen Green. You could easily say Jabari Smith. You could even easily say somebody like Amen Thompson, surprising everybody in a faster growth rate than we all expect. But listen, I love a good point guard. I love a good point guard. I know style of point guard. There's all kinds of debate about the style of point guard of today. I'm looking forward to seeing how Fred VanVleet changes this Rockets team on the floor. his veteran leadership. I'm not talking about just being flashy, because we've seen flash. I mean, listen, even in games that we lost over the last 2 years, there were really some exciting moments, and moments that got everybody up out of their feet, on their feet, and out of their chairs and screaming and enjoying themselves. But I love the art of basketball, and I love to see somebody as the quarterback of an offense on a basketball court. And if Fred VanVleet can come in here and be that guy and help facilitate, it's only going to improve what we've seen out of Alperen Şengün, who you can't help but love. He is – I try not to have favorites, but if I had a favorite, he's certainly going to contend for it. I love him.
Yeah.
Jabari Smith. After the last game against Denver, walk up to Jabari, share a few words. I love the guy. I could name others. KPJ, there's so many. But it really comes down to me as to how is Fred VanVleet going to be able to come in here and effectively quarterback this offense and be a facilitator and be a scoring presence. And if he comes in here and is able to lead not only physicality, but emotionally, if he's able to do that, by the end of this season, it's going to give us excitement for the future that we haven't seen in the last couple of years. So he's the guy that I'm really looking to see. He's the one I'm most curious about. Yes, you mentioned Whitmore and Thompson and Jabari and Jalen and KPJ, and you could go on, but that he was a big target for us. And there's a reason why Ime Udoka wanted him in Houston. So he's the guy that I hope to see the biggest bang this season, because I think he can make a huge difference for everybody, not just himself, but everybody who's on the court with him when he's out on that court.
That's probably the safe money bet, honestly. He is he's a good
I'm
player.
The safe
man.
money better, I guess.
Yeah, he's pretty good, man. He's a really good player, man. Like it's not just the leadership, the intangibles you talk about, right? It's the facilitating, it's the 3-point shooting, which is going to be much needed, which has been much needed on this team for the past couple of years. This floor has not been the most adequately well spaced in quite a while, so it's going to be nice to have that from the point guard position, pretty much 48 minutes a game, because you're going to get KPJ coming off the bench shooting threes for you too, and you're probably going to have at times 3-4 shooters on the floor at all times, which is great. Like having that adequate floor spacing for these guys to develop in is something that, it's underrated, but it really does aid in like just getting cleaner looks for these guys. Like it doesn't matter how great your first step is, right? Jalen Green can get past anybody in the NBA right now, right? His first step is that quick. But if that paint is clogged, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, right? And Fred's going to provide a ton in that respect, just spacing the floor for him.
No discredit to any other guys on the floor. Please do not get me wrong, because I think they're all great. But I think he can come in here and make them even greater. I think he can take them to a level that without him, they're still great, but he's going to take them to a level, like you say, with spacing and things of that nature that's going to be very valuable to their trajectory of growth as an NBA player and as for the team. I think about Alpi. I mean, listen, his potential is so sky high. Having a point guard like Fred VanVleet come in is only going to benefit him.
I would hope so. Like it's going to be something that I definitely am going to be watching for. How he's integrated into the offense alongside Fred VanVleet. VanVleet is someone who is very much a conductor in that respect. Like he is not someone who is going to lead the team in scoring, right? Like that's never been his thing, right? That's not what the Rockets.
I don't think that's what Ime wants.
Yeah, it's not what the Rockets sought out from him, right? He's not getting paid a max contract because he is going to average 27 points a game for Houston, right? He's getting paid a max contract because he is going to slow the game down for everybody, and slowing the game down benefits someone like Alperen Şengün, who gets the opportunity to really operate in that mid post area.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how the 5 spot is going to be used this year under Ime Udoka. I'm excited to see, anxious to see how that's going to be used and how that role will be used this entire season and how it will kind of change throughout the season. I just think that's one of those questions that I don't know the answer to right now, but I have a favorable opinion of what he can do with it.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Like Alperin Şengün to the moon, man. Like I am a huge believer in the dude, and I think he can
Yep.
be a real factor for this team long term, not just for next season. I think he came into the Rockets and had a real impact as a rookie to the point where I don't think he was slated to play that first year, and I think he
I don't
earned
know.
his way into that lineup because he was that damn good in training camp.
That whole part was so much like a blur to me, right? With coming into the organization the way I did, and then boom, here we go, and I'm brand new, right? He's brand new, and it was just such a blur. And but looking back on it, like you say, that's exactly right. I don't think anybody expected him to make the impact as soon as he did.
Yeah, yeah. I just remember that training camp in Galveston, just seeing people walk out like, oh my god, like, this guy's so good. This guy's so like often like, oh, that he was the best player on the court tonight. Like not tonight, practice. Like he just really shocked people. And I think it did well for him long term. Like earning his rotation spot, earning a starting spot last year, and hopefully solidifying that this year. It's going to be really interesting to watch. All right, Jonathan, I'm really glad we had the opportunity to finally do this. Like, please let the people know where we can follow you on social media, where we can find you throughout the season.
All right. So first of all, on Twitter, the TheJSanford. That's the J Sanford on Twitter. The same on Instagram. The J Sanford on Instagram, and also at Rockets Entertainment on Instagram. You can follow either myself or our in-arena host, Kiati, or in-arena DJ Palmo. So at Rockets Entertainment for the overall entertainment staff of the Rockets.
Flash the shirt again.
Got to flash that shirt, Rockets Entertainment. But, yeah, catch me on Instagram, catch me on Twitter. Listen, send me your messages. Let me know what you like and what you enjoy about our Rockets games. Take videos of your time at Rockets games and send them to us. We'll put them up on Rockets Entertainment and show you off and let the people know how you enjoy our Rockets games and how you enjoy Rockets Entertainment, whether it's Clutch the Bear, who we all love, our Clutch City dancers, myself, Kiati, and, of course, DJ Palmo. Let us know how we make your game experience enjoyable, because really that's what we're there for. We want to help you make memories because we know the team is going to make some good memories this year, and we want to accentuate those positively for the fans who join us at Toyota Center.
Great talking to you, Jonathan. Please make sure to follow Jonathan on Twitter and buy a ticket this year and listen to him in the arena, please. It is really gonna be fun this year. Like whether the Rockets win or lose on a night, it's gonna be really competitive. I think. I think it's gonna be really competitive every night. I think, and that's gonna be a nice change of pace.
Yeah, I was getting a haircut the other day, and young lady was cutting my hair. She said, "Hey, when should I get tickets?" I said, "Get them early. Get there preseason, because it's going to be exciting. And early season, you're going to see a lot of newness and a lot of excitement and a lot of growth. So get there early. If you're a fan, get there for shoot around. Get there as quick as you can on game nights. Don't wait until, one thing I don't enjoy over all the years I've been doing announcing is to be doing intros and look out and there's not a lot of people in the arena, or maybe they're stuck in traffic. So get there early, get there, be loud, and have a good time. Make some memories that you'll talk about for 20, 30 years from now.
And for all the people who complained during the Harden era about those ticket prices, listen, you guys have no excuse.
They have been blessed with nice ticket prices over the last couple of years. And listen, I've got friends of mine that have been going to games that I've been announcing for the last 20 years, and they're like, "Hey, we love it because we get to come see you quite a bit. We get to come listen to you quite a bit and not go broke in the process." So take advantage of it, especially right now while this team is growing, and be a part of that growth with them, because Like you said, ticket prices are great right now, and there's a lot of great season ticket prices that folks need to take advantage of. So don't waste your time. Get it now.
Yeah, ask Grizzlies fans about ticket prices pre John Morant breakout and post John
Great
Morant
point.
breakout.
Great
Yeah,
point.
like if someone breaks out this year for the Rockets, you're gonna want to be first.
Yep.
You're gonna want to be first. All right, Jonathan, great conversation. I'll talk to you down the line.